Kia ora, good evening, welcome everyone. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you along to the second Fast Forward lecture, and it's absolutely great to be back in person. Obviously we've been online for the last 2 years, and I was just discussing with some of the staff here at the university, we hadn't actually been in this room for 3 years to run Fast Forward, so it's actually great to have you here. For people who don't know me, my name is Dr. Leigh. I'm the head of the School of Architecture and Planning. The Fast Forward series is an absolute critical part of our relationship with the community and serving our professions, both in architecture, urban planning and urban design, and also with the community generally. So we really value these types of forums. Today, as we move through our series of dealing with the social implications of TODs and urban design, we have the absolute great pleasure of having Leigh Auton and his crew, and he'll introduce his own crew. But Leigh, I think, goes without saying, is one of New Zealand's leading members of the planning profession, ex-president of the Planning Institute, fellow of the Planning Institute, actually my first boss at Manukau City Council days, where he ended up becoming the CEO of Manukau City, went through transition and been involved in many, many projects dealing with local government in New Zealand in a stellar career. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you. I'm not surprised whatsoever that you're in charge of looking after Light Rail, which is going to be one of the biggest transformation projects. And I actually remember interviewing Leigh for my doctorate, and he told me that one of his greatest achievements at Manukau City, I don't know if you remember this, was actually bringing the rail from Puanui into Manukau City. And it's really great that you're actually doing it again, bringing light rail, which is critically needed to the city. So before we pass over to Leigh, I'd just also like to thank Jib, and who are our sponsors of this program and have been for such many years, and without them we wouldn't survive. So I'd like to invite John up to the stage to just have a quick talk about some of those things, and then we'll pass over to Leigh. So thanks very much, John. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Leigh. Seems that we've got a Leigh theme going on tonight. It's the planning department. Is that a prerequisite? So, thank you, and it is indeed wonderful to see real people, and we're looking forward to that continuing. Winstone Wallboards, Jib Plasterboard are very pleased to continue our sponsorship of the Fast Forward series, and more so, as you can see above us, we've been manufacturing now, the only manufacturer of plasterboard in New Zealand for almost 100 years, a few years to go, and as part of that we've got our factory in Auckland and a factory in Christchurch, and we are currently building a new facility in Tariko in Tauranga, and we're looking forward to that being operational about June next year, although we are hoping we're trying very hard to have that facility open a little bit earlier, but worldwide challenges with logistics is not helping things. So without any further ado, how do we get the little presentation going above me?
I think if I just do this for you,
In 2023, Winstone Wallboards will open its new Jib plasterboard manufacturing and distribution facility in Tauriko, Tauranga. Tauranga is New Zealand's 5th largest city and is the fastest growing regional economy. It is New Zealand's fastest growing regional job market and home to the largest, most efficient port in the country. The new Winstone Wallboards plant will be based at the Tauriko Business Park, 10 kilometres from Tauranga City. It will be built on 12.8 hectares of land, making it 2.5 times bigger than the current site. Designed with sustainability at the forefront, this plant will be a significant step forward towards Fletcher Building's goal of reducing carbon emissions by 2030. The new plant will have extensive recycling capability on site for water and waste. It will also include new state-of-the-art technology and equipment, enabling the business to manufacture the full range of our Jib plasterboard products with a high degree of flexibility. Automated processes will also ensure increased enhancement of the safety and manufacturing processes. The new Winstone Wallboards facility reinforces our commitment to manufacturing in New Zealand, and we look forward to sharing this journey with you.
Yeah, the intention is at this stage to continue manufacturing in Auckland and Christchurch, and Tauranga simultaneously. And once we've got the whole supply issue under control, then we'll close the Auckland plant and demobilise from Auckland. So yeah, fingers crossed. It should all go well. And if you've got any questions afterwards, feel free to give me a arm.
Thank you, Leigh, for that introduction. I was in 2012, 2013 actually an interim chief executive at Tauranga City. So I remember the work that was just being done on the development of Tauriko. So it's actually good to see it being developed. But Leigh, thank you for those kind words. And yes, reflecting on that rail connection to Manukau, that was the first heavy rail connection built in New Zealand since 1932, which is a long time between drinks. But kia ora koutou katoa. It's great to see you all here, and thanks for the opportunity of being here. I think the last time was at amalgamation time. I talked about the journey at Manukau, which was 32 years, and for good or bad, a lot of the things that happened in the south, which I'm pretty proud of, and still live there. It was under my watch, with some great people and some great planners, great engineers, and others have been through that establishment. So look, thank you for the opportunity for us to present tonight. It is a shared presentation, and you can see I brought a team along. There's apologies from Amanda Harland, who's actually in charge of the urban work stream, which is a significant part of this project. She's recovering from COVID, so we didn't think that we would bring her along, but we've got some very able former graduates of this fine planning department, and in fact quite recent, so I'll introduce them shortly. Can I just acknowledge the members of the school, Leigh? You know, it's now got quite a long history, hasn't it, this planning department, as part of the wider faculty of creative arts and industries, and I just want to acknowledge you know, all the people that have passed and here currently. So it is a pleasure to be here. I was a graduate here in the 70s, and in fact early 80s, with two qualifications from the planning school, and I've valued that relationship since, and that's why I'm part of the Planning Institute and its governance as well. Can I just note that this is actually my last day as chair of the establishment unit, on the 31st of May. Tomorrow there's a new board comes into play, of which I'm a member of the board, but Dame Fran Wild is the new chair, and I'm delighted to have Fran as the chair. She brings a skill set which is an additional to whatever I may have in this process. So she's actually in Auckland at the moment, meeting lots of people, and the government appointed Lucy Takua Ngāti Paua as well as the first three before others appointed to a skill-based board. So she takes over formally tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to working with her, and we'll explain how we've gone from an establishment unit to now a formal unit that's actually being established, and there is a governance structure being put around that over the next little while. I just want to also note that the budget just allocated just over 300 million for us to work with over the next 2 to 3 years. I think that right, Cam. And again, we'll sort of indicate some of that's for the work that we do. There's a huge procurement process with working with a lot of people in the industry, planners, engineers, urban designers, etc., in the next couple of years. And I think Cam will talk about the procurement, which is actually out there live as we speak. Can I say what's exciting as a planner is that this is a city shaping a project. It is a transport intervention, but the huge benefits are about the shape and form of our city, both physically but also, you know, socially and economically. This is a big project for the New Zealand economy. We haven't been great in this country of actually doing big strategic urban developments. Unlike our friends and cousins across the Tasman. You know, there's any number of light rail projects, but it is about shaping our city for the future, and it's within the context of the work that's been done around the likes of the unitary plan. You know, it's about consolidating, it's intensifying our city. In my role, in my career, I've done lots and lots of greenfields, and I, still support it. But the reality is, we either build, across the Bombay Hills in a greenfield, or else we actually look at how an intervention like this, it's a transport intervention, transport investment can shape our city into a different form. It will assist us with congestion, but it will mightily assist us with our lifestyle and our economy and the social conditions that parts of our community do talk about. And we'll talk about transport poverty a bit later in the presentation. So with that, I'm going to hand across to this team, recognising we have a reasonable constraint on time. We do want to get to questions, but Cameron here, he's going to speak first. We do have a series of slides which we want to talk to. Cam is involved with the business case approvals and is our sustainable lead. He's a RMA lawyer with a lot of experience in transport projects, and showing his commitment to public transport, he became a car-free household last year. So there you go. There's a tick. Now we have two wonderful graduates from the school. One 2017, one 2018 master's program. So Fleur, hands up. Fleur, urban planner, involved in planning in New Zealand and Australia. And she's been involved in this project, and we'll describe how the establishment units worked over the last year shortly, about through secondments. But she was a graduate in 2018. And Alyssa, a background in long-term spatial planning. She's also grew up in Manarewa, where I live as well, so that's another plus for her. So, so with that, I'm now going to hand over to Cam, and then Fleur and Alyssa will then run through the urban component. And I do want to stress this is about a city shaping project. The benefits, the huge benefits, come from the urban shape, and it's a long-term project, and it's part of a much bigger intervention across our region, which Cam will talk to. So with that, Cam.
Kia ora koutou all. So yeah, I'm going to talk about some of the transport issues and business case issues before Fleur and Alyssa move on to the urban. I just want to stress that yes, it's a transport intervention, but it's a transport intervention that leads to urban regeneration, and the urban regeneration is both the focus and the reason for some of the decisions that we have made. So this is kind of our no new news slide for anyone in this room. Auckland's growing. And we're going to need to figure out how to meet those transport and housing needs and not from a good starting position. And we need to figure out how to unlock jobs and housing and make sure that I was going to say retain, but I might go so far as to say create a city that's accessible and attractive for all. And I'm sure people in this room are familiar with some of those challenges. And the biggest challenge, I think, for us is growing in a way that is sustainable. So with 700,000 more people than today and 400,000 more dwellings, where is that going to go? And do we just continue this pattern that we have of car-based dependency and sprawl, which has significant climate impacts and reduces livability and impacts disproportionately on disadvantaged communities who are pushed further and further out and have both long commutes and also quite often poor public transport services, relatively speaking. So if we address the problems, we hope that we will get increased urban density and economic growth and all the benefits that come with that urban form, including increased community wellbeing. We'll improve the environment, particularly through mode shift and carbon reduction, but not just limited to that, and we will improve public transport accessibility to communities across Auckland. These are the outcomes that the government set us. They wanted us to focus on access and integration, That was the first and I guess pretty obvious one of what everyone thinks what the outcome of this project is, and that we needed to integrate with both the current transport network and also the future transport network, and that becomes quite relevant to the decision we ended up making. We want to optimise environmental quality and embed sustainable practices. And this point again, urban and community, that really it's about grasping those opportunities to transform Tamaki Makaurau, to look at where we can get much more integrated urban communities, and there's a whole bunch, there's 3 listed there, but there's a whole bunch of opportunities along this corridor with quite low levels of development intensity at the moment, which Alyssa and Fleur will speak to. Obviously a high quality experience, and the Crown also asked us to look at value for money, which is not quite the same thing as cost, but we can go into that if anyone is interested. Generally people aren't interested in the business case process. And on that, we were tasked, this slide is, I guess, backward looking. It's asking, just informing you as to of what we were asked to do and sort of who we were. We are in the process of establishing an entity at the moment, but we haven't been an entity. We're kind of a group. We have our own establishment board, which Leigh chaired, but our group and all our staff are essentially seconded across from various different organisations. So Waka Katahi, in my own case, there's MOT, kind of, or Auckland Transport, Auckland Council, and trying to also establish partnerships with mana whenua. And so we were asked to progress an indicative business case, which is basically to go through the range of sort of higher level options and advise the government on, and sponsors actually, which is the ministers and the mayor and deputy mayor, on options, which options, high level options we should proceed with, and to work to build, engage with the community and build social licence, which is the work that Jen is doing. And out of that business case, we got decisions on mode, route, funding and financing, and the delivery entity, which are all now proceeding. And so you will have seen that that the government made a commitment to tunnelled light rail, which was based on a recommendation. I'm going to cover just quickly in the next few slides a few points on why tunnelled light rail rather than surface. I'm hoping I don't need to cover why rapid transit rather than roads, but we can go there if anyone wants to. But I know that was a controversial decision for some. If it's not something we want to pick up in questions, we can come back to it or not. But just to be clear, we were also quite clear in our recommendations that surface light rail met the objectives and would be a good project. But there are a bunch of reasons why we recommended. Oh, sorry, Jen, back one. Why we recommended going with tunnelled light rail. And by tunnelled light rail, what we mean is a line that will run from Wynyard Quarter to Mount Roskill, and then its surface from about Mount Roskill south. This image is not intended to be any place in particular. I know it's been picked over, and some of you spotted, which absolutely none of us did, a flyover that the artist had put in the background and assumed that we're leaving Dominion Road flyover up. It almost certainly is not going to be remaining because it's a great development opportunity for the project. So it's a lesson for us to zoom into these drawings because I think we looked at them on this scale. Okay, thanks, Jen. So this is the option that we came up with in the alignment. You can see the slightly different colour on, hopefully you can, between the tunnelled alignment and the surface alignment. So the tunnel takes us through Wynyard Quarter, Aotea, which is now Te Waihoretu, up to the universities, so very close to here. Exact station location still to be finalised. This is just kind of thinking at a catchment level. Then, as I mentioned, the great opportunity somewhere around that Dominion New North Road interchange. Then this bit needs a bit of explanation, I think. From there onwards to State Highway 20, we have a tunnelled route and we have flexibility. I know that alignment there on that map looks a bit like Sandringham Road, and if we decide that we want to pick up Kingsland Station and the Kainga Wesley development, then it probably will be pretty much like Sandringham Road. But it's a deep tunnelled alignment and we can go wherever we want through that section. So we will be developing some sort of matrix of assessment to ask ourselves what are the transport connections and more importantly, what are the urban opportunities along that corridor that we really want to pick up. So we're not stuck with a particular alignment. We were of course asked to go Central City, Mount Roskill, Onehunga, Mangere and the airport. So then we follow along the motorway alignment. For most of the rest of the route, we are at surface though in our current proposal through Onehunga and through Mangere Town Centre, in the latter case at the express request of that community, the very determined request of that community that they did not want a motorway-based station. And this slide is to talk a bit about the reasons for tunnelled light rail, but also to kind of set the context of the broader network. So the green lines is our existing existing train network. You can see the blue going north there, the Northern Busway, which is itself going to exceed capacity in about 10 years' time. So we need to think about how we serve the North Shore. The red line from the city centre south to the airport is the line that we are proposing. But we're setting it in the context through the Auckland Rapid Transit plan of what comes next, and that's a line out to the northwest and a line out to the North Shore. A line up to the North Shore. And when we started to model that, we found that basically you needed a tunnel through the city centre if you were going to connect them straight on. You could have made people transfer, which would have been fine. But a better connection both in terms of capacity and travel time required us to actually connect those in and to tunnel, in particular through the central city. And it gives us flexibility for what to do with the additional Waitemata Harbour crossing as well, and that has been brought on further. So it's essentially around, we can go into it if people are interested later on, but capacity and travel time issues once you start to think about that broader network. And hand over to the two of you.
Hi everyone, so my name is Alyssa Jones and I work at Auckland Council, but like Cam, seconded to the Auckland Light Rail project for just over a year now. So as the title of this slide suggests, and hopefully you've heard this before, this is an urban project that is facilitated by a transport investment. The city centre to Mangere corridor is a significant part of Auckland, so not only because of the scale, but because of the role and function, as well as the places that are located within it. A large number of Auckland's jobs are in the corridor, most of which are in the city centre and in and around the airport. It's important that the project better connects communities with a diverse range of employment opportunities across Auckland. There are also well-established communities and residential areas in the corridor, and we recognise that these communities will have different needs and aspirations. As we all know, there are two major tertiary institutions in the corridor, and there is an opportunity for the project to connect Aucklanders to these, but also to other significant destinations such as Marae, Maunga, and Eden Park. And there are also many other opportunities to build on what's existing, including projects that Auckland Light Rail can leverage off. These include the City Rail Link, Kāinga Ora's Roskilde and Mangere developments, as well as Eke Panuku's Transform Onehunga project. So to illustrate the city shaping opportunity that is unlocked by this project, this graphic shows the scale of growth that's anticipated in the corridor. The project has the potential to facilitate the delivery of 66,000 additional households over the next 30 years. This is equivalent to a quarter of Auckland's total growth in the existing urban area and equivalent to another Hamilton. The project will also facilitate more jobs, including the opportunity to increase the diversity and type of employment opportunities for local communities. And not forgetting about our young people. Many more young people will grow up in this corridor, and we need to understand what their needs and aspirations are for the future. So the growth anticipated in the city centre to Mangere corridor needs to be aligned and consistent with the broader context of Auckland's growth. So there are various overarching central government, local government and mana whenua strategy and policy documents which set the direction for Auckland Light Rail. So at a central government level, these include the resource management reform, the National Policy Statement on Urban Development and Emissions Reduction. At local government level, these include the Auckland Plan and Te Taruki a Tawhiri, Auckland's climate plan, as well as area plans and other plans that council produces. And there are also mana whenua iwi strategic plans and management plans that we also need to take into account. I'll pass over to Fleur.
Hi, I'm Fleur. So as an urban project, we need to think about Auckland Light Rail as about a network of connected centres. So as Alyssa has already mentioned, many already, in fact all already have their own established communities that have their own aspirations and desires for their community and for the opportunities that Light Rail can bring and concerns. However, the needs of communities will change, and when we think about urban, we're thinking beyond the 10-year timeframe that it will take to build the light rail. We're thinking, out to that sort of 2051 and beyond. So when we start to think about the different centres and understand their different sort of opportunities and the roles that they'll fulfil, we need to think about them both in isolation and in their relationship to other centres in the corridor. So the graphic that you see up there is a piece of work that came out of the indicative business case and which will be developed further over the next phase of the project. So sort of looking at a potential development that you might get within the corridor and the type of urban interventions that we need to think about in conjunction with the transport intervention that is light rail in order to achieve the outcomes that we want. So that's anything from collaboration with partners like Kāinga Ora to optimising station location, site amalgamation and improving local connectivity, so walking and cycling alongside that. And just moving on to sort of some of the work we've been doing to build and maintain a social licence. So social licence is a really important part of this project. And as you can see from that graph up there, there is a lot of positive sentiment towards light rail already, and we'll be working really hard over the next phase of the project to continue to ensure people understand the opportunities and also hear their concerns and what they think is important. So key findings from that engagement are that Aucklanders do really want light rail. As you might expect, communities along the corridor express the strongest need and desire for it, but we did hear from people right across New Zealand and internationally who thought that light rail was a really important thing for Auckland and would be a key thing for them if they were to visit the city or to move here. Reducing our carbon footprint, both in terms of embodied emissions and operational, is a really important aspect for people. And again, having that reliable, frequent, safe and comfortable public transport connection to jobs, to employment, to their friends, to places they want to live, work, learn and play. People understand that light rail is going to support new housing and that community partnership is critical to deliver the outcomes that we want. There are concerns, as you would expect. Affordability of using the system is really important. It's understandable. You can just see the impact that half-price public transport fares have had on ridership recently, so it clearly makes a difference. Gentrification in communities is a key concern. And then in the more immediate term, construction disruption, and CRL has provided a lot of really good lessons learned for us in that space. And then also the impact on environmental, cultural, civic and heritage taonga across the city. And as you can see, it's a generational shift. So the people who are most supportive of light rail that we've talked to are young people. And that's really important because that younger demographic are the ones who are going to be living and working and learning and playing in Auckland and riding the light rail and really sort of reaping the benefits of the system going forward. So it's really great to sort of see that support there and to hopefully be able to grow that going forward. I think that's back to Cam for these ones.
Okay, so sorry, just a couple more from me about where we're going next. So we've now been asked to develop what we're calling a corridor business case. As I said before, there's not many people interested in the details of business case process, but for those of you who know anything, who've done some, normally we would be moving to a detailed business case. And in the sense on the transport interventions, we are. But what we're trying to do through seeing this as a corridor business case is to also bring along the urban interventions and run them through sort of a process to identify which interventions will best achieve the potential of the corridor and best support the transport intervention. So I think that my expectation is that what we will produce in terms of that business case is not just a document that says you should fund light rail, but a document that says you should fund light rail, you should fund these active mode improvements along the corridor, and possibly you should fund some specific transit orientated development or urban realm improvements, and you should commit to these are the urban interventions, and what those are the process that we need to go through to establish that all of those are justified in what they are. We are knee-deep in procurement at the moment, trying to bring on a big team to help us progress our designs. So that will be the next phase. As soon as we get the procurement complete, we then kick off with an optioneering process to try and understand all the sort of technical details about the transport options and the urban options as well, and come up with our best preferred set of interventions. Along the way, we're trying to engage with the community and understand their concerns and interests and views on what should happen, including the future community, the community that doesn't live there yet and wants housing. And then, of course, once we've got that design, we'll be trying to progress that through consenting. We will need to think our way through the NPSUD. Those of you who have followed that will notice that the policy statement on urban development hasn't yet decided what to do with the corridor, and that's the holding position while we think about the implications of light rail. But a decision will still need to be made by August, because that's the requirement on council. So that's where we're going, and we will develop a business case that, as I said, indicates things like the exact alignment and the station locations and what we want to do around those, but also all of the urban interventions that support it. And we've got the Hungry Caterpillar next, have we? Yeah. So this is where we're at. We've moved through the decision in yellow, and we're now working on that says detailed business case, but yeah, the corridor business case, going through that process that I just talked to, getting community feedback to inform that, reaching a decision, and then trying to get it consented. And so that's from me. I hand back over to Leigh.
Thanks, team. Just a couple of points. Cam just mentioned the procurement process. So there is a link between the Waitemata harbour crossing, which is, as he intimated, is quite a significant issue of it's a great problem to have, of the use of the North Shore busway, and we know from modelling that will reach capacity in the near future. But you'll all be aware that there's been any number of attempts to look at the harbour crossing going forward. I think there's been about 7 studies in the last 20 years. I think Tommy Parker, who I just want to acknowledge, who's led this team very ably, I think he was brought out from the UK with Kiwi parents to look at that harbour crossing. So the government, certainly with our advice, is very keen to link the two projects together. So the procurement process that's currently out there is seeking to procure the consortia of engineers and planners and urban designers and whatever to do the indicative business case for the harbour crossing alongside what Cam has just explained in terms of the light rail. So we're doing a joint shared process. It's a waka katahi process. We're doing the light rail under the Auckland Light Rail board process. That's taking place as we speak, and by September there'll be 2 consortia. Neither can do both. We'll be undertaking that work, and there is quite an essential link between those two matters. The other thing I want to emphasise is, and I'm speaking from a governance perspective, and I spend quite a lot of my time in governance. Can I say the board was a representative board? I have to say it was a delight to work with people, as indicated by Cam, from Peter Mercy from MOT, from the CEO from Waka Katahi, through observers from Treasury and from the New Zealand Infrastructure unit, but Auckland Council, a key part of that. So having Chris Darby as chair of the planning committee, having Margie Watson from the local board, having Jim Starbuck, CEO, on the board, urban designer from Kangora, etc., and critically to iwi representatives, Narimu Blair from Ngāti Whātua Rākei, and Karen Wilson from Te Akatao Wāhua going forward. In terms of governance, I reported through, tomorrow will be different, through to the Minister of Finance or the Minister of Infrastructure, as well as Minister Wood from the Minister of Transport, and more latterly Minister Megan Wood. So 3 ministers plus the Mayor and Deputy Mayor. So as part of our role in terms of reporting, and my report that went through, we recommended, and it's been adopted by the government, that they add to that sponsor group, which I've mana whenua representatives. And if we think about our society and the way we develop, we need to have that Māori input into it, and we're going to interweave as much as we can that Te Haha Māori view on urban development going through, but they will be represented alongside those 3 ministers and the Mayor and Deputy Mayor at the sponsors level, as well as, and I mentioned, Lucy Tukua has been appointed to the skill-based board, which I'll be part of. But I just want to say that board has worked really well. It's a bit of an odd construct, but it worked well. We're now moving to a skill-based board. And the other underpinning that was, as Cam said, that mixture of resources from different agencies has just been a gem, and we're going to carry on that on the way through. So with that, Leigh, we're open for questions.
So I understand that we're struggling to increase the capacity of heavy rail because we've kind of locked ourselves in with interlining multiple routes through a couple tracks in Auckland, hence the need for the city railing to alleviate pressure. What's the rationale behind deciding that this light rail project will be at the centre of creating a tunnel through our city centre, through which our other future light rail projects would also be interlined? Do we not face the risk of getting ourselves into the same trap that we did with heavy rail if we're committing to running everything through one tunnel in the city centre as opposed to a network across our streets?
Yep. Look, it's a fair point, and it's the balance and the trade-offs that we need to think through. We could do surface light rail. What we couldn't do is surface light rail interline. That wasn't going to work, but we could have done surface light rail coming in on different lines and had people transfer. I think where that ended up was one of the options that was sort of put up for the Crown, but where we ended up recommending was that the travel, thank you, that's useful. The travel times and became significantly longer with that type of surface light rail network, particularly if you were someone wanting to get from Albany down to Mangere or the airport or somewhere like that. And also we feel with these 2 lines there is, for quite a long period out, there's sufficient capacity even with the interlining. But that's the balance, that is the trade-off, you're right. And I guess all I would say is that my personal hope is that this is not the full network, and that I don't see why we wouldn't put other surface lines in through other places, but this is kind of operating a bit as a spine, and so I think I think you're right to say that that's the trade-offs, and that's where we've landed on it.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions? Mr. No, we'll go to you, then we'll go to you, Mr. Allen.
So this question is all about me.
Just could you speak a little bit loud? Sorry, we don't have a microphone.
The question is all about me. So I consider myself an outlander. I work in Auckland City, CBD, and I travel in. The opportunity to use public transport from Waimalku is a 20-minute drive to park my car, and then it's an hour and a half. So that's 4 hours a day just for the privilege of working, which is outrageous. So I don't use public transport. My question and my concern is where we're looking at the trains finishing, like you look at QMS as starting finishing point. You look at that now, where do you park your cars? So my whole point with where you're going to connect with rail, if you don't live within walking distance and you need to travel, and there's probably hundreds of them, where do we park our cars? So is there any future planning around acquisition of land, around parking, so we then can avail ourselves of that opportunity as well?
I mean, I think I can have a crack at that. I think partly it's a question for Auckland Transport, and I'm not an Auckland Transport person. I wouldn't read too much into that particular red line. It's just kind of showing what a northwest line might look like. So where it stops and starts is a whole other work stream away. But I think that Auckland Transport is trying to move away from park and ride facilities by and large, and so what this kind of network with this sort of spine of core lines then requires is interconnection with with non-rapid transit, so still public transit services, buses, and so what we have to do is make sure that actually the services that connect to it, because what you should be able to do, and of course we're never going to get everyone, that's not possible, but hopefully we can move enough people that then the roads are clear for other people. But if we, what you should be able to do in most parts of the city is have a short walk to a bus service at least that connects you into that rapid transit service, so you've only got that one, well, depending on where you're going, that one transfer. And I guess the other point about this project being an urban project is that we're trying to actually realise the opportunities, and stop me if I get this wrong, guys, but we're trying to realise the opportunities to encourage more people to live within walking distance of those rapid transit stops.
I mean, for me personally, I choose to live where I do, but I've got to drive 20 minutes to get to my nearest bus stop. And so, and that will change in time, but it's just, if you've got a lot of people who are wanting to travel in, that live in peninsulas or whatever, and use the public transport system, where do you park your cars? And
you'll have to direct that question to the Auckland Transport team, but I think that's probably the best answer I can give, is that we are trying to move to a system where you can use public transport, non-rapid transit public transport, to connect into the rapid transit network.
And I suppose that was one of the critiques about the Albany bus station, wasn't it? Was the idea there was going to be that big bus park and ride that went with it, and never initiated that part of it. So I understand what you're saying. Doug, over to you. I can actually say that to Mr. Allen.
That issue about AT, not really listening to what people want to do in terms of their travel and trying to impose on them what it thinks they should do, is one of the problems we have in the city, because a lot of people want to use a park and ride, but they're told really that's not the way you should do it. Get a bus from your house, and that becomes a problem. But my issue is again, and this is a map that's good. I think, Leigh, you mentioned transport poverty. I may not have heard it correctly, but my observation is that most of these big programs are in the parts of the city that already have the best public transport. I live in Mount Albert. I've got a 2-minute walk to a bus. I've got a 7-minute walk or a 20-minute walk, whatever, to the bus on the way home. I can walk home from here if I have to. People who live in the suburb I used to live in, Leigh, as you know, is Manarewa, don't have those choices. Out in West Auckland, you don't have the choices. East Auckland, you don't have the choices. It's a really complicated process, and what we're doing is we're putting more and more money into the isthmus, but the transport poverty is actually not in the isthmus, it's out in suburbia, and it's very difficult for people to get into places like the city. Now, if I look at that map, I've got a rapid transit network with this light rail, which is a great idea, and it takes you from the city to the airport. And the airport, in a sense, is an adjunct to the wealthier parts of town. It's a convenient way for those who live in the CBD to get out to the airport. Why isn't this, in terms of your options, going on to the only metro centre that's near it, which is Manukau? Why doesn't it link into Manukau? Because at the moment, this proposal doesn't go through any metro centres. It goes through a bunch of town centres, which is fine, but we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on that, and we're not linking the places that really matter, in my view, in terms of, say, South Auckland's transport integrity, which isn't great. Because at the moment, in terms of that thing, you've got to go back to Monday, the airport, then back to Puanui, then to Manukau. So is that part of the things you looked at, or is that sort of the government said, I'm linking the airport with the CBD, you find the best way to do it?
I'll answer that, and being a resident and long-term worker in the south. Yes, there is transport poverty, and Māngere, you know, we heard that and we know that, you know, to get from Māngere into the city is a real challenge. And it's really interesting to go through the history of people who, you know, came to this country from Polynesia, you know, went to the central city, they built all the churches there, and then they were displaced to Māngere, you know, and there's valid reasons and all that. But they actually still want to they still actually use those churches back in town. One of the biggest movements on a Sunday is actually by car from Māngere to back to, you know, the Grey Lynn, etc. to us. But we heard it loud and clear, and I guess one of the really satisfying parts of this process to date was actually hear those voices in Māngere. You know, they were very clear what they wanted. You know, there was very much going to be surface rail. They wanted it linked to light rail. They wanted it linked to the town centre. But their ability to get from Māngere into the centre or get, you know, into the Grey Lynns or whatever is really critical to them, you know, because it takes a good hour to get from there. Probably Māngere is probably one of the worst. Manarewa, actually, well, I take the train. It's actually great service, and there's actually Auckland Transport, to their credit, have done a lot of good stuff over the last years in terms of integrating, you know, hubbing buses into the train station. When I give it off at Manarewa, you know, even, you know, off peak, but certainly peak, there's a huge number of people move onto buses to link down to Weymouth, etc., etc. But it is the challenge, and so you know, one of my former mayors had a go at me why we weren't building the light rail up, you know, from the airport up to the Mighty Manukau and up Te Irarangi Drive. We built Te Irarangi Drive with 11 extra metres of width to allow for light rail, but we recognised it could be rapid bus until you actually build to that perspective. That's what's happening on the North Shore. Rapid bus, then you move to the next form, which is light rail. It takes more people. That will happen. So, you know, council, Auckland Transport, the government investing an awful lot of money on Puhinui Road, linking to Puhinui, big new station, links, and they're going to be building to Botany, Eastern busway to Panmure. So, you know, I look at it as a sort of it's a tapestry which you have to have the core, and the core is the CBD, and I actually will support that forever. That, you know, we need to make access to our CBD as a critical part of our network. But critically, it's a link to the North Shore, up to Milldale or Hairewa, ultimately to Kumeu. It's a long-term project.
But it doesn't link from Māngere to Manukau, which is...
Well, actually, we're working closely with the airport company in terms of that link, and you can, you know, get onto buses, and it's rapid bus, you know, to Puhinui, rapid bus to Manukau, etc., etc. You know, yes, you could put the investment in there, but in reality, there's probably more critical parts of the infrastructure we need to put in place first. And I'm speaking from someone from the south, you know, would love to see light rail, but you have to prioritise.
There's the airport to Botany project as well.
Yeah, the airport to Botany project, which is underway, currently being built. So
Sorry, I missed that.
there is currently, they are building the rapid bus from airport to Botany to Pakaranga to Panmure, you know, and I think that's the right decision.
And that's a really efficient way of using money, buses, because buses can change very quickly.
Yeah, I understand that, but if you have actually, you know, North Shore, Leigh travels on it, you know, actually has proven to us that it can work. You get, you know, convenience, you know, efficient service. People will move on to, I think, more than half of the North Shore employees that come into this side of the harbour travel by that rapid bus. You know, it is really impressive. You know, and I'm pre-amalgamation, but, you know, we decided on heavy rail, North Shore busway. Ultimately, we're going to move to light rail. Waitakere pushed hard for light rail. They stepped back from it, but, you know, now we're in that position. You know, I'm pretty proud of the work that's been done on heavy rail. Lots more to be done, but it's one part of the tapestry. But, you know, light rail is another part, and clearly rapid bus.
Up there, and we'll come down to you. Yeah, to you, sir.
I'm a cyclist nowadays, car-free household like Cam, and I was excited to go to a bike Auckland event last week and hear about all the new paths. But I used to be a motorcyclist, and it strikes me as crazy how we've still got this 50cc moped class, when in Asia, if anyone's ever been to Thailand or Bali or whatever, there's 150cc motorbikes in that lower registration cost class where you only need a car licence. It just strikes me as crazy that New Zealand, Australia, United States, probably the UK as well, still has a stupid 50cc class of a noisy, smelly two-stroke. Is there ever going to be something done about this?
I think it's probably outside our ability to respond, but take the point. We talk to the Minister of Wood fortnightly. We'll raise it with him. I have to say it's been a delightful working with Minister Wood. He gets the picture, he drives it, he sponsors it. But look, the issue around cycleways and walkways is a critical part of the urban redesign that we need to do, you know, and I think that's one of the exciting parts around that. So each of these, how many stations are sort of generally?
Oh, there's 24.
24. Each of those areas have to be redesigned and planned. You know, that's where urban designers and planners and engineers, you know, are going to be engaged in. But the opportunity of reinventing, you know, our walkways and our cycleways, etc., linking to, and it goes back in part to the point, I know it's further out about park and ride, but our ability to reshape it so it's easy to use these facilities is really exciting in my opinion. Yeah.
Thank you, Virginia.
I was thinking about the current cost of living and you know, like Auckland Transport and Auckland Council has tried policies like, you know, bike lanes, but not many people use it. And I'm worried that, you know, your project, is there going to be a public uptake, or is it going to be another big blowout, money blowout that's going to hike up the rates and make life harder but not give up any benefit?
Yeah, can I say my experience with heavy rail, and you know, in the 90s I sat on a committee trying to negotiate via Treasury with, was it Toll, I think, owned the network, trying to get access to rail. And we were down to 2.5 million passengers on an old, rumpety old train system which we had bought from Perth. And so I heard all those arguments, you know, some of my politicians, you know, we're never going to use it. So we actually did, you know, we broke through that and we actually started to rebuild our heavy rail. You know, pre-pandemic we were up to 22.5 million passengers. So in 10 years we went from 2.5 million to 2. So in a sense, if you design it well and you provide it a convenient service, you know, it's comfortable, secure, etc., people will use it. Now the pandemic has affected it, but look, I'm quite convinced, you know, it'll recover. You know, I came in this evening and, you know, and saw the trains going out. You know, people are starting to stand, you know, in peak hours again, etc. So they will. So my view is you build it right and you build it well, they will come. My frustration is the speed that we're actually doing it currently. Not so much this project, but in terms of those cycleways. You know, South Auckland, you know, and maybe it's part of my watch going back. You know, we've got a lot of work to do around cycleways. You know.
So you think it's value for money?
Yeah, I believe it is. Yeah, it's expensive. It's all expensive.
Can I have a plug that the business case, which is the test of value for money, had a significantly better, for all light rail options, had a significantly better business case than, and I shouldn't say this being a Wakatahi employee, but than most of the motorway projects or roading projects that we've built. So the value for money is the test. And that's not to say that those projects shouldn't have proceeded at all, but value for money, the light rail projects are showing that they will knock it out of the park.
Sorry, as an observer, I live in Albany, and the Albany Spaghetti Junction has been an ongoing issue for probably 4 years to me. The pain of you know, that development. However, what's the distinction between a tunnelled light rail and a tunnelled CRL? Is there any?
Tunnelled
light rail concept.
Yeah, so surface light. Well, sorry. CRL is a heavy rail line, even though that one in particular is just carrying passengers. It's designed to that same standard to carry freight, and tunnelled light rail is basically more like your trams and stuff that you might see in Melbourne, but we're tunnelling a section of it, but it will still be a surface light rail kit essentially, because it needs to come to the surface for the rest of the alignment. And you know, there are some inefficiencies about that. There's also some flexibility in that.
So just there and then this.
So you guys have mentioned transit-oriented development and intensification a fair bit recently. I understand that the proposed, however many proposed routes there are for light rail, go through a lot of prime villa stock in the central isthmus in the villa belt. And I'm sure you're aware that with the new MDRS, a lot of our councils are fighting to protect those villas from being opened to intensification. Has ALR done anything to consider alternative routes should those special character areas be successful, or have you done anything to attempt to convince the council that, you know, we need intensification in the villa belt? Or
I'll have a go at answering that as the Auckland Council, Auckland Light Rail member. So the project is working really closely with Auckland Council. Ultimately, the decisions that are made in terms of special character areas or any decisions on the MPS are in the remit of Auckland Council rather than the project. But yeah, like I say, the project and the council are working really closely to understand the best MPSUD and therefore, you mentioned MDRS as well, the best response for this Auckland Light Rail corridor. So we also know that the response will be different in different locations in the corridor. So if we've got an area, like you say, has special character, for instance, and the decision is to protect that, then as an Auckland Light Rail project, we need to design a station that respects that character, but also delivers what that community needs.
so, I guess then I'm sort of asking is, if you're putting a light rail line through a special character area that won't be able to reap the benefits of light rail intensification, would Auckland Light Rail be considering alternative routes through areas that allow intensification to maximise the returns and gains we've made?
So that's kind of a business case question, and we need to justify the investment. So we need to do one of two things in that case, in my mind. One is, even though, as Alyssa's pointed out, the council is responsible for NPSUD, if we think that a greater level of urban intervention is required to support the investment, that's advice that we will have to give to the Minister, and then Cabinet can do what it likes with that, essentially. Or the other question we need to think about is routes potentially at a more, the nuance of that level of where the tunnelled light rail goes. Certainly we will be looking for the bigger urban interventions. That one. So we'll be looking to tie up urban spots, but also we would, I guess, have to question whether a station in an area that had no development potential was worthwhile. And given that we've got a tunnel, we don't have to put stations in, and they're a big expense. And the tunnel itself, once you get going, is not a huge expense compared to the stations.
Can I just make an observation on that? Because this is sort of the topic at the moment. I'm not planning because I sort of want to do by day, but in terms of this route, yes, it goes through Mount Eden, and we don't know what's going to happen with that, but let's assume it stays special character, because actually it is. That's probably, 2 or 3k of a 25 kilometre length or whatever. It's not a vast amount of it, and when you come to the south of that, those are areas that have already got significant increases in development capacity. So much of this line does go through areas where already under the unitary plan there can be thousands more houses, and there will be because Kainoura is doing it. And there's a balance for the council and governments and parliaments come in and say, well, we're going to decree things for you, but there is actually a balance still left for council about how you balance those things between the special character and where the growth happens. And we're not a city that needs to grow everywhere. We are a city where there's already capacity for 900,000 new sites within the existing urban area, says council. And there'll be many more with the new one now. So I don't think it necessarily drives a change in the route. What it, as you say, Cam, it drives where you put your stations.
Over to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that this project is completely context dependent, but I wonder about international examples. Obviously, we're quite late bringing in light rail compared to most major cities around the world. So I'm wondering, overseas, what international cities are considered kind of inspirational for where you think this project's going to go? And also, how does this sort of project learn from the mistakes and the good things that have happened through the various experiences overseas?
Do you want to have a go? Yeah.
I'll get Cam to talk as well. But yeah, we are learning from as much as we can from overseas, Australia obviously, but we have Frank Allen from Dublin who inputs into this process and reviewed what we're doing simply because of their experience, similar sized city. They've actually chosen, I think it's surface rail there, but he talks about the challenges of getting the first stage up and running, and that's where we're up to, and all the stuff that goes around that. By the time they put that in, there was demand for extensions to the light rail in that place, and they actually, in terms of the benefits from this, which is hugely the urban component, the urban uplift. In Dublin, they paid for half of it through uplift, value uplift from going through. Actually, I think it was sort of they're through their different communities. But we have Anna Chow from who's been involved in Sydney. The Treasury Observer on our report actually has had 20 years experience in New South Wales with light rail public transport. So look, I think there's, could be wrong, Cam, but I think Tommy talks about well over 100 light rail projects around the world for us to actually access into. Do you want to add to it, Cam?
Just really quickly going to add that our procurement ROI that's gone out asking for consortia to work on this has indicated that we think it's both a local and international consortia, that we're looking for obviously some local context and understanding, but also a team with international experience. So we are kind of buying that in, I guess, and hoping that we will have teams that, well, not hoping, it'll be a requirement that have delivered projects like that before. But I also was just actually wondering, I don't know, Alicia, if there are any that, from an urban perspective, that you guys particularly reference?
Feel free, Fleur, to add as well. I suppose in terms of the context point, closest context to New Zealand, what we always look at is Australia. So Gold Coast Light Rail is definitely a project that we've looked at, and Sydney Light Rail as well. There's many projects in North America that we've looked at, and in European cities as well. I think Seattle is one that we've looked at. Yeah, I think Fleur knows more about the walkable catchment side of things and the response in then. So
yeah, no, I think Alyssa sort of broadly covered it. We're looking very globally to get sort of an understanding of what works and what hasn't worked. Obviously, the New Zealand context is different, and the kind of interventions we can use in New Zealand are different. But there's a lot of lessons to be learnt. And just to add, we also have a few members of the urban team who have worked on rapid transit projects overseas, particularly in the UK. So it's sort of lots of experience to hand that we can draw on as well, in addition to the procurement that Cam's talking about.
I'm just conscious of time, so I have one last question, because I was going to say after this we can all have a drink and you can harass these guys further, but over to you, one last question.
Sorry.
No, go for it, it's all good.
My question is all about the relationship to cycling, really. I'm wondering to which extent this might be an opportunity to influence an increase in cycling culture in New Zealand, how the transport itself will incorporate infrastructure for carrying bikes. If, say, the transport is at high capacity with people, sometimes in London, for example, they get very, very packed, and you don't want to see a cyclist trying to get through there at all with their bike. Also, about how that might break up the experience of cycling between parts of Auckland, and how the problems may be present in that. One example, I suppose, is I recently had the privilege of spending a day cycling out to Manurewa and back, and it really opened my eyes as to some of the tapestry, I suppose, is one way of putting it, as to how different parts of production are broken up across that route, and how like a lot of those mangrove swamps maybe in need of like a little bit of some awesome people going and picking up the rubbish that's dumped in them and stuff like that. So yeah, just.
Sure, I can talk to. I'll have a crack at some of the active mode stuff, and Alicia and Fleur might have something to add as well. As I said before, we're thinking about it, the business case will talk about a range of interventions, and light rail is just one, and I think a whole plan for active modes needs to be the other. So I'm expecting that around each of the stations we will have developed, and this will be part of the catchment development work that the urban team are doing as well, safe active mode connections, so cycleways and better walking facilities to enable development of areas around stations so that people can feel comfortable and safe walking and cycling to stations, or last mile safely at night and so on. I don't know how we're going to handle bikes on trains, because I agree that can be a real capacity problem. One part of that answer could of course be just to make sure that there are safe bike storage facilities at the stations along the way. And also encouraging, like I'm going to say Lime because it's the only example I can think of at the moment, but the hire bikes, which is actually kind of, I said before about being car free, that's kind of how I get around now, looking okay on a bike and slightly ridiculous at my age, I think, on a scooter, but like we can provide for those sorts of facilities, and there's a whole heap of work that we need to do in that space.
I probably only have one thing to add to that, which is, the walking and cycling isn't being thought about in isolation to projects that are already existing or underway. So, Eke Pānuku, connected communities, CRL, there's a lot of walking and cycling investment and projects planned around that. So we've sort of been looking at it in conjunction with those and looking for opportunities to build off the good work that's already happening.
Just a little story. My son lives in Bromley in London, and he works in the CBD. He's actually involved with transport, that's what he does there, but he cycles every day. It takes him about 45 minutes. We tracked him with one of those apps at one stage, and he was doing 52 kilometres an hour. It takes him under an hour to cycle that distance in London, and he prior to that, he used to use the train, but he uses the cycle. It's amazing, some of the cities around the world where, with decent infrastructure, and they struggle too, it's not perfect, but, the aspiration has got to be that we can actually allow for active modes of transport in our city, of which light rail is one of it, but, cycles, etc., are a key part of that. So I think we've got a lot of work to do. Certainly, if I took again for South Auckland, awful lot of work to do on our cycleways, but we've got to do it in a way that's sensitive to the community. And so we went on a bus tour just recently in Māngere, where there's actually a lot of work being done on safer cycling into that town centre, and it's not used. And you sort of got to learn from that why, with all this investment that went on, the Auckland Council, they did a great job on it, but it's not used. So I'm not sure what went wrong. I sort of can guess, but we've got to be sensitive to communities and how we do it. So I'll leave it on that, Leigh.
So, thank you very much. Just wanted to say thank you very much, Leigh and the team, for coming along and presenting tonight on the Light Rail project. And it's great to see some alumni of the school here. Three out of four are alumni of the school, which is absolutely fantastic from the school's point of view. We do see ourselves as being in that space of teaching the leading architecture, urban planning, urban design part of the disciplines in New Zealand. So it's great to have you here, and I'd just like to thank you and your team for their opportunity to speak to us this afternoon. So thank you very much for everything you've done. It's a very exciting project. I think it's just listening to you herding the cats was just incredible. I use that not term lightly, but the amount of people that you're dealing with is incredible. So hopefully that gives you an insight to the complexity of it. Just encourage you all to come back next week. We're back online, unfortunately, next week. And next week, a colleague and myself will actually be talking about TODs, to do with TODs, to deal with growth management, and why haven't we used COVID as an opportunity to think about some of the things we've talked about today, which is local community building and to reduce the need for interregional travel, especially car travel. And we'll be talking about that next week. So we'll unfortunately back online. So thank you very much. There are some drinks and some food out there. We'd like to thank you all for coming. And again, I'm sure they're going to hang around for a bit longer, so you can bail them up for a few more questions if you like. So thank you very much for your time and have a good evening. Thank you. Thank you.